Marcus Bryant stood outside the tall glass building that had his company name on it. The sign said Horizon Technologies in big, bright letters. He was 52 years old now, and his hair had some gray in it. He remembered when this building did not exist. He remembered when he had nothing but a dream and a cheap laptop. That was 25 years ago when people laughed at his ideas. They told him he would fail. They said a person like him could never build something great. But Marcus proved them all wrong. Today he wanted to see his company with fresh eyes. He wanted to walk inside like a regular person and see how things really worked. He did not tell anyone he was coming. He wore simple clothes that morning, just blue jeans and a plain black jacket. His expensive suit stayed at home in the closet. He wanted to be invisible today. He wanted to see the truth about the company he built. The morning sun made the glass building shine bright. Young people walked past him carrying coffee cups. They talked about their meetings and their projects. Marcus smiled a little. He used to be like them once, young and hungry and trying to prove himself to a world that did not believe in him. He started walking toward the main entrance. His heart beat a little faster, but he was not sure why. Maybe he knew something was about to happen. Inside the lobby, everything looked clean and modern. The floors were shiny. The walls were white. Big screens showed the company logo and messages about innovation and progress. Marcus felt proud for a moment. He built all of this from nothing. A security desk sat near the elevators. A young woman named Kelly Brooks worked there. She had blonde hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. Her uniform looked crisp and new. She was looking at her computer screen when Marcus walked up to the desk. Kelly looked up at him. Her eyes moved over his casual clothes. Her face changed a little. Something in her expression became cold. Marcus noticed, but he said nothing. He had seen that look before, many times in his life. It was the look of someone making a judgment in 1 second. The look of someone deciding he did not belong somewhere nice. He stopped at the desk and smiled at her. Kelly did not smile back. She just waited for him to speak. Her fingers stayed on her keyboard like she was ready to type something important or call for help. Marcus kept his voice friendly and calm. He told her he wanted to look around the building. He said he was just visiting and wanted to see the offices. Kelly sat up straighter in her chair. Her voice became harder. She asked if he had an appointment. Marcus said no. He explained again that he just wanted to see the company. Kelly shook her head. She told him this was a private building. She said he could not walk around without permission. Then she asked if he was looking for a job. She said the employment office was at a different location across town. Her words hit Marcus like small stones. Each one stung a little. He had heard these kinds of words before. The words that said you do not belong here. The words that said you must be lost or confused or looking for something you cannot have. But this time was different. This time it was his own building, his own company, his own employee telling him to leave. Marcus took a deep breath. He stayed calm. He told Kelly he understood her concerns, but there was a misunderstanding. Kelly reached for her phone. She said she would have to ask him to leave. She said security was very important and she could not let random people walk around. Before Marcus could answer her, a young man walked through the lobby. His name was Christopher Lane. He wore an expensive suit and carried a leather briefcase. He worked in marketing and had been with the company for 3 years. Christopher saw Kelly talking to Marcus and he walked over to see what was happening. Christopher asked if there was a problem. Kelly explained that this man wanted to enter the building without authorization. She said she was asking him to leave. Christopher looked at Marcus. His eyes went up and down, taking in the jeans and the plain jacket. His face became serious. He crossed his arms over his chest. He stepped between Marcus and the elevators like he was blocking the way. He told Marcus he needed to exit the building. He said they took security very seriously at this company. Marcus felt something heavy in his chest. It was sadness mixed with anger, mixed with disappointment. He could tell them who he was right now. He could watch their faces change from confidence to shock to fear. But something stopped him. He wanted to see how far this would go. He wanted to understand what was really happening in his company when nobody knew the boss was watching. He spoke quietly. He said he thought there was a misunderstanding. Christopher shook his head. He said there was no misunderstanding. He said Marcus did not belong here. He said Marcus should leave before they called the police. Other people in the lobby started to notice. Employees slowed down. Some stopped walking. They watched the scene at the security desk. A few pulled out their phones. Marcus stood there feeling the weight of their stares. He had built this company to be different. He had built it to be fair and open to everyone. He had written the mission statement himself. It talked about respect and dignity for all people. But right now, none of that mattered. Right now, he was just a black man in casual clothes being told he did not belong in a nice building. Marcus asked why exactly he was being asked to leave. Kelly stood up from her desk. She looked uncomfortable now. She said he was making things difficult. She said this was a business and he could not just wander in from the street. Marcus pointed out that he had watched many people walk past the desk without being stopped. He asked why he was different. The question hung in the air. Christopher's face turned red. He said those people were employees with badges. He said Marcus clearly did not work here. Marcus asked how Christopher could tell. Nobody answered that question. They all knew the answer, but nobody wanted to say it out loud. More employees gathered in the lobby now. They formed a small crowd around the security desk. Some whispered to each other. Some just stared. Marcus felt all their eyes on him. He had felt this feeling many times in his life. The feeling of being watched and judged and found guilty of something he did not do. The only crime was existing in a space where people thought he did not belong. But this time hurt more because these were his people. These were the employees he had hired and paid and trusted to run his company the right way. Christopher lowered his voice a little. He said he did not want to embarrass Marcus. He said Marcus needed to understand that the building had strict security rules. He said if Marcus had real business there, he could schedule an appointment through the proper channels. Marcus almost laughed at that. The proper channels. The website and the contact forms and the automated responses. He had designed all of that himself. He had sat in meetings talking about making the company accessible to everyone. Now he was being told to use those systems to get permission to enter his own building. An elevator door opened and an older woman stepped out. Her name was Patricia Simmons. She was the Vice President of Human Resources. She had worked for Horizon Technologies for 15 years. Marcus had hired her himself back when the company was much smaller. He remembered the interview. He remembered choosing her because she talked about fairness and respect and building good workplace culture. She wore a gray business suit and her hair was styled perfectly. Her shoes clicked on the shiny floor as she walked toward the crowd. Patricia asked what was going on. Her voice had authority in it. Christopher turned to her looking relieved that someone more senior had arrived. He explained that this man was refusing to leave the building. He said security had asked him to go, but he was being difficult about it. Patricia looked at Marcus. Her eyes scanned his face and his clothes. Marcus looked back at her. He wondered if she would recognize him. He had been in meetings with her many times, but today he looked different. Today he looked like someone she could ignore. Patricia asked Marcus if there was something specific he needed. Marcus chose his words carefully. He said he wanted to see how Horizon Technologies operated. He said he had heard great things about the company. He said he heard the founder believed in creating an inclusive and fair workplace. He said he wanted to see if the reality matched the reputation. Something flickered in Patricia's eyes when he mentioned the founder. For a second, Marcus thought she might understand, but the moment passed. She told him that the founder built the company on principles of respect and fairness. Then she said perhaps he should have called ahead. Marcus nodded slowly. He said perhaps he should have, but he said he wanted an authentic experience. He said he was certainly getting one now. The words hung in the air heavy with meaning. Patricia studied him for a long moment. There was something in the way he stood, something in the way he spoke. It seemed to make her pause and think. But she did not act on whatever thought crossed her mind. She told him she would have to ask him to leave. She said if he had legitimate business with Horizon Technologies, he should contact them through official channels. Marcus felt tired suddenly. Tired of proving himself. Tired of being questioned. Tired of fighting for respect that should be given freely to every person. But he had one more question before he left. He asked Patricia if she believed the company lived up to its founder's vision. The lobby had gone very quiet now. Everyone waited to hear her answer. Patricia thought about the question. She looked around at the employees watching. She looked at Kelly behind the security desk. She looked at Christopher standing with his arms still crossed. Then she looked back at Marcus. She said she believed they tried their best. She said no company was perfect. She said they worked hard to honor the principles they were founded on. Marcus smiled, but there was no happiness in it. He thanked her for her time. Then he turned to walk away. As he turned, a young man came rushing through the entrance. His name was Danny Wu, and he was one of the youngest department heads in the company. He was brilliant with computers and programming. He had a tablet in his hands, and he was clearly late for a meeting. Danny almost crashed into Marcus. He stumbled, and his tablet slipped from his hands. Both men bent down to pick it up. Their eyes met. Danny's face went completely white. His mouth opened and then closed and then opened again. He had seen Marcus before. He had been in company-wide video meetings where Marcus spoke to all the employees. He had seen the photos that hung in the executive wing on the top floors. He knew exactly who Marcus was. Danny whispered the name. He said, "Mr. Bryant." The lobby seemed to freeze. Everything stopped moving. Kelly's hand stopped reaching for the phone. Christopher's confident posture collapsed like someone had pulled his bones out. Patricia's eyes went wide. Her face showed horror and understanding all at once. Marcus gently took the tablet and handed it back to Danny. He thanked Danny for recognizing him. He said he wished the circumstances were different. Kelly put her hand over her mouth. She said, "Oh my God," over and over. Her voice was shaking. Christopher looked like he might throw up. His face had gone from red to white in seconds. He started to say something about not knowing. He said they did not know who Marcus was. Marcus held up his hand to stop him. He said that was exactly the point. They did not know who he was, so they made assumptions. They decided he did not belong. They treated him like a threat or a problem instead of a person deserving respect. Patricia stepped forward. Her professional mask was cracking. She apologized. She said they had no idea he was visiting. She said if they had known, things would have been different. Marcus finished her sentence for her. He said if they had known, they would have rolled out the red carpet. They would have treated him with respect. But he said that respect should not depend on knowing who someone is. It should be given to every person who walks through the door, rich or poor, famous or unknown, black or white. Every person deserves dignity. The silence that followed felt thick and heavy. Marcus could see understanding washing over their faces like cold water. They knew what they had done now. They knew how badly they had failed. Not just failed him, but failed everything the company claimed to believe in. Marcus spoke again. His voice was calm, but it carried power. He said he wanted everyone involved in this incident in the main conference room in 30 minutes. He named Kelly and Christopher and Patricia. He said anyone else who was there and said nothing should come too. He looked around at all the people watching. Some met his eyes and he could see shame there. Others looked away at the floor or the walls. A few younger employees looked confused, like they were still trying to understand what happened. Marcus continued speaking. He said the company was built on the idea that talent and character mattered more than appearances. He said innovation came from diverse perspectives. He said every person deserved dignity and respect. He said somewhere along the way they had forgotten those things. Danny spoke up. His voice was small and nervous. He said this was not representative of everyone at the company. He said many people truly believed in what Horizon stood for. Marcus nodded. He said he hoped that was true. But he said belief without action meant nothing. He asked how many people stood there and watched this happen without saying a word. He asked how many people thought something was wrong but chose to stay silent. Nobody answered. The question was like an accusation hanging in the air. Marcus told them all to be in the conference room in 30 minutes. Then he walked to the elevator and went upstairs alone. The conference room was on the top floor. It had big windows that looked out over the city. Marcus stood by those windows waiting. 30 minutes felt like a very long time. He thought about all the years he had spent building this company. All the late nights and early mornings. All the times he had been rejected and dismissed and told he was not good enough. He had pushed through all of that to create something better. Or so he thought. Now he was not so sure. The door opened and people started coming in. Kelly came first. She looked like she had been crying. Her eyes were red and her hands shook a little. She sat at the far end of the long table and stared at her hands in her lap. Christopher came next. He kept adjusting his tie like it was choking him. He could not look at anyone. He sat down and stared at the table. Patricia walked in looking calm on the outside, but Marcus could see tension in the way she held her shoulders. She sat near the middle of the table with her notebook in front of her. More people came in. 12 employees total who had been in the lobby during the incident. Some were young workers who had just started at the company. Others were managers who had been there for years. All of them looked uncomfortable. They knew they had failed some kind of test. They knew something important had broken and they were part of the reason why. When everyone was seated, Marcus turned away from the windows. He did not sit down. He stood at the head of the table and looked at each person. He started by telling them a story. He said 25 years ago he was a young man with an idea. He believed technology could change the world. He believed innovation could come from anywhere and anyone. He took that idea to investors and tried to get funding. He pitched his vision to 47 different investors. He asked if anyone knew how many said yes. Nobody answered. Marcus said none of them. Not a single investor believed in him. They looked at him and made their assumptions and decided he was not worth the risk. Some were polite when they rejected him. Others were mean about it. But the result was always the same. He told them he started the company with $7,000. That was all the money he had saved from working 2 jobs while going to school at night. He wrote computer code for 18 hours every day. He slept in his office on an old couch. He ate cheap noodles for months because he could not afford real food. But he believed in something bigger than himself. He believed that if he could prove his worth, then doors would open. He believed that hard work and talent would eventually matter more than the color of his skin. And slowly, very slowly, doors did start to open. The company grew. Success came, but it was never easy. Marcus stopped talking and leaned against the table. He said when he hired each person in this room, he did not just look at their resume, he looked at their character. He wanted people who believed in fairness. He wanted people who valued diversity. He wanted people who understood that greatness came in many forms. So what happened today? How did they get to this point where his own employees treated him like a criminal for walking into his own building? Patricia spoke first. Her voice was steady, but Marcus could hear emotion underneath. She said there was no excuse for what happened. She said she failed him. More importantly, she failed the principles the company was built on. She said she saw someone who did not fit her idea of who should be in the building. She made a judgment. It was wrong. She knew it was wrong now. She was sorry. Marcus listened. He said it was not just wrong. It was a betrayal of everything they claimed to stand for. He asked how many talented people they had turned away. How many brilliant minds they had dismissed because those people did not look the part. Christopher finally found his voice. It shook when he spoke. He said he never thought of himself as prejudiced. He voted for progressive politicians. He donated money to civil rights organizations. He considered himself a good person. But today he saw Marcus and made assumptions without thinking. He was ashamed. He said he understood if Marcus wanted him to resign from his job. Marcus studied the young man. He said prejudice was dangerous not because of obvious bigots who openly hated people. It was dangerous because of good people like Christopher. People who thought they were fair but acted on unconscious bias without realizing it. Marcus turned to address everyone in the room. He said they had all failed a test today. Some failed by actively discriminating. Others failed by standing silent when they saw something wrong. Both were unacceptable. A young woman named Lisa Chen raised her hand. She worked in accounting and had been new to the company. She said she wanted to say something during the incident. She really did. But she was scared. She was new and she thought if she spoke up, people would see her as a troublemaker. She might lose her job. Marcus's expression softened a little. He said he understood that fear. He had felt it himself more times than he could count. But he said courage was not the absence of fear. Courage was acting despite fear. If they could not stand up for what was right in their own workplace, then how could they claim to be changing the world? How could they claim to be innovating or leading or making things better? Words meant nothing without action. Values meant nothing without practice. Marcus walked to the windows again. He looked out at the city for a long time. Nobody spoke. They all held their breath wondering what would happen next. Finally, Marcus spoke. He said he could fire everyone in this room. He could make an example of them. He could send a message that this behavior would not be tolerated. Part of him wanted to do exactly that. It would feel good in the moment. It would feel like justice, but it would also be the easy solution. It would let him pretend that removing them would remove the problem. But that was not true. He turned back to face them. He said the problem was not just individuals. It was systemic. It was cultural. And it started with him. He had been so focused on growth and innovation and competing in the market that he stopped paying attention to the culture he was creating. He assumed that because he founded the company on good principles, those principles would naturally continue. He was wrong. Good intentions were not enough. Building a fair company required constant work and attention. Patricia leaned forward. She asked what he wanted them to do. Marcus said he wanted them to learn. He wanted them to understand not just what they did wrong, but why it was wrong. He wanted them to help him fix the company. He pulled out his phone and made a call. He told his assistant to clear his schedule for the next month. The entire month. He said he was going to be working on something important. When he ended the call, he looked at the group again. He explained what would happen next. Over the next 4 weeks, they would completely overhaul how the company operated. They would examine hiring practices and security protocols and training programs. They would look at every department and ask if they were really living up to their values. Christopher asked if all of them would be involved. Marcus said yes, all of them and many others. This was not punishment. This was an opportunity. A chance to build something better. A chance to create the company they always claimed to be. He sat down for the first time. He said he needed to know they were committed. He needed to know they understood the gravity of what happened. He needed to know they were willing to do the hard work of changing. If they were not ready for that, if they thought this was an overreaction, then they should leave now. No hard feelings. They would go separate ways. But if they stayed, they had to be all in. Nobody moved. The room stayed silent, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not the silence of shame, the silence of determination. Kelly spoke up. Her voice was quiet but clear. She said she could not take back what she did, but she wanted to learn. She wanted to be better. Her grandmother was an immigrant who faced discrimination her whole life. Her grandmother would be so disappointed in her right now. She asked Marcus to please give her a chance to make things right. Others began to speak. Each person acknowledged their failure. Each person committed to change. Marcus listened to every word. When everyone had spoken, he nodded. He said they would begin tomorrow. 8 in the morning in this same room. He told them to bring their assumptions and their blind spots and their uncomfortable questions. They were going to tear the company down to its foundations. Then they would build it back up the right way. The next morning came too early for most of the people in that conference room. They arrived at 8 looking tired and nervous. Marcus was already there. He had coffee ready and pastries on the side table. Nobody felt much like eating, but the gesture was noticed. This was not going to be about punishment. It was going to be about learning and growing and becoming better. Marcus started by bringing in outside help. He did not hire the usual corporate diversity trainers who showed up with PowerPoint slides and generic advice. Instead, he found people who had real experience. Activists who had spent years fighting discrimination. Community organizers who understood systemic problems. People who had lived through the things they were going to discuss. The first person to join them was a woman named Grace Phillips. She was in her 60s with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see right through people. Grace did not waste time with pleasantries. She asked them directly why this happened. She said they built a system that prioritized comfort over justice. It was easier to hire people who looked like them, people who talked like them, people who went to the same schools. It was easier to assume someone in casual clothes did not belong. Doing the right thing was hard. It required constant vigilance. It required being willing to feel uncomfortable. Christopher raised his hand like he was back in school. He asked how they could balance security concerns with being welcoming. He said they did need to protect the company and its assets. Grace smiled at the question. She said that was exactly the right thing to ask. Real security came from understanding, not suspicion. Guards should be trained to assess behavior, not appearance. Someone acting nervous or sneaking around might need attention. Someone simply existing while not matching expectations did not deserve suspicion. Over the following days, they dug into everything. They looked at security protocols first. They discovered the training manual for guards had subtle biases built in. It told guards to question anyone who did not look like a typical tech worker. But what did a typical tech worker look like? The manual never said it directly, but the examples and photos all showed young people in casual clothes, mostly white, mostly men. The message was clear even if nobody intended it that way. They moved on to hiring practices next. The company claimed to value diversity, but the numbers told a different story. Most employees came from a handful of elite universities. The recruitment team went to the same career fairs every year. They posted jobs on the same websites. They used the same networks. All of this created a pipeline that was narrow and exclusive. Talented people from state schools or community colleges rarely got a chance. People from different backgrounds never even heard about the opportunities. Marcus brought in data analysts to look at the numbers. They found that resumes with traditionally black names got rejected at higher rates than identical resumes with white-sounding names. Nobody had done this on purpose. It happened because of unconscious bias in the people reviewing applications. They saw a name and made assumptions about culture or communication or fit. These tiny biases added up to a system that kept certain people out. Even the office layout told a story. The executive wing on the top floors had expensive artwork and leather furniture. The break rooms had fancy coffee machines and comfortable seating. But the lower floors were plain and functional. The cubicles were cramped. The break rooms had basic machines and plastic chairs. The message was clear. Some people mattered more than others. Some people deserved comfort and beauty. Others did not. Patricia took detailed notes during every session. She had been in human resources for decades, but she was learning things she had never considered. One afternoon, she spoke up during a discussion about workplace culture. She said she had always thought treating everyone the same was the goal, but Grace explained that equal treatment was not the same as fair treatment. People came from different backgrounds with different barriers. True fairness meant recognizing those differences and adjusting accordingly. The group worked long hours. They had difficult conversations. People got emotional sometimes. Kelly cried more than once when discussing how her actions had hurt Marcus. Christopher struggled with accepting that his good intentions did not excuse his behavior. But they kept working. They kept learning. Marcus was there for all of it. He did not lecture or punish. He shared his own experiences. He talked about times he had failed to see his own privileges or biases. He made it clear that this was a journey for everyone. After 2 weeks, they started implementing changes. New training programs were developed for all employees. Not just security guards, but everyone from executives to janitors. The training covered unconscious bias and active intervention. It taught people how to recognize when something was wrong and how to speak up safely. It emphasized that building an inclusive culture was everyone's responsibility. The hiring process got a complete overhaul. Horizon Technologies began partnering with community colleges and historically black universities. They started attending career fairs at schools they had never visited before. They implemented blind resume screening where names and photos were removed before the first review. They created diverse interview panels so candidates met people from different backgrounds. They changed the office spaces too. Art from diverse artists went up on every floor. Comfortable furniture appeared in break rooms throughout the building. The cubicles on lower floors got redesigned to be more spacious and pleasant. The message was clear. Every employee mattered. Every person deserved a good work environment regardless of their position. But Marcus knew structural changes alone were not enough. Hearts and minds had to change too, so he started doing something he had not done in years. He began having lunch in the cafeteria every day. He sat with different groups of employees. He listened to their stories and their concerns and their ideas. He made himself accessible in ways he had forgotten to do as the company grew. One day he sat with a group of junior programmers. Among them was a young black woman named Tanya Johnson. She had joined the company 6 months earlier and was quiet during lunch. But near the end, she worked up the courage to ask Marcus a personal question. She asked how he kept going when investors rejected him. How did he not give up when people doubted him? How did he handle the weight of constantly having to prove himself? Marcus thought carefully before answering. He said he would not lie and pretend it was easy. There were nights when he wanted to quit. Nights when the burden felt too heavy to carry. But he realized something important. He was not just building a company for himself. He was opening a door for everyone who would come after him. Every time someone told him he could not do it, he thought about young people who looked like him. Young people with dreams but no path to achieve them. He wanted to build that path, Tanya nodded. Her eyes were bright with emotion. She thanked him. She said it meant a lot to hear that. Marcus asked about her experience at the company. She said it had been mostly good but sometimes challenging. There were moments when people made assumptions about her abilities. Times when she had to work twice as hard to get the same recognition as her peers. Marcus listened and took notes. These were the stories he needed to hear. These were the problems that still needed fixing. The 4 weeks passed quickly. By the end, the company looked different on paper. New policies were in place. New training was completed. New partnerships were formed. But the real test was whether the culture had actually changed, whether people would act differently when nobody was watching. Marcus knew this was just the beginning. Creating real lasting change would take years. But they had started. They had taken the first steps. And that was something. 3 months after the lobby incident, Marcus decided it was time to test whether real change had happened. He could look at policies and training completion rates all day. He could read reports about improved diversity numbers, but none of that would tell him if the culture had truly shifted. He needed to see for himself how things worked when nobody expected him to be watching. So Marcus did something similar to what he had done before. He dressed in casual clothes again, jeans and a simple shirt, comfortable shoes. He left his expensive watch at home. He drove to the office in his regular car instead of having his driver bring him. On a Tuesday morning, he walked into the lobby of Horizon Technologies looking like any other person off the street. This time was different from the first time. Kelly was still at the security desk. When she saw Marcus walk in, her face changed. Not with suspicion, but with recognition and something like fear. She stood up immediately. Marcus held up his hand and smiled. He walked to the desk and spoke quietly. He said he was testing the new protocols. He said she should treat him like she would treat anyone else. Just a visitor without an appointment. Kelly looked uncertain, but she nodded. Marcus stepped back and waited. Kelly took a breath and spoke in her professional voice. She asked if she could help him. Marcus said he was visiting and wanted to look around.
Kelly asked if he had an appointment.
Marcus said no. Kelly pulled out a form. She asked his name and who he was here to see. She did not tell him to leave. She did not call for backup. She just followed the new procedure for unscheduled visitors. Marcus gave a fake name. Kelly wrote it down. She explained that without an appointment she could not let him wander freely. But she could call the general information line and see if someone could help him. She asked what his interest in the company was. Marcus said he had heard good things and wanted to learn more. Kelly smiled. She made a call. Within 5 minutes, a young woman from the Public Relations Department came down to the lobby. Her name was Rachel Kim, and she was part of the team that handled visitor inquiries. She introduced herself to Marcus warmly. She did not know who he really was. She just saw a potential client or partner or someone interested in the company. She offered to give him a brief tour of the public areas and answer questions. Marcus accepted. As they walked through the building, Rachel pointed out different departments. She talked about what the company did and what values it held. Marcus asked questions to test her knowledge and sincerity. He asked about diversity initiatives. Rachel did not give corporate-speak answers. She talked honestly about the work they were doing. She mentioned the incident with the founder a few months ago. She said it had been a wake-up call for everyone. She said they were actively working to be better. Marcus appreciated her honesty. She did not pretend everything was perfect. She acknowledged the journey they were on. They passed by the cafeteria and Marcus noticed the changes he had ordered. People from different departments sat together. The space felt more open and welcoming. Artwork from various cultures decorated the walls. Rachel noticed him looking. She said the company had made a big effort to create spaces where everyone felt they belonged. She seemed proud of these changes. That was a good sign. After the tour, Rachel thanked Marcus for his interest. She gave him information packets and her business card. She said he should feel free to reach out with any questions. Marcus thanked her and left the building. Once he was in his car, he called Patricia. He told her the test had gone well. The new protocols worked. Kelly had handled the situation perfectly. Rachel had represented the company with honesty and warmth. Real change was happening, but Marcus knew one test was not enough. Over the following weeks, he conducted more experiments. He had friends and colleagues visit the building unannounced. People of different races and ages and dress styles. Some had appointments. Others did not. He tracked how each person was treated. The results were encouraging. Security guards followed new procedures consistently. Employees were welcoming and helpful. The culture was shifting in the right direction. There were still problems, of course. One security guard named Pete Carter fell back into old habits. He questioned a young Latino man more aggressively than necessary. The incident was caught on security cameras. Patricia called Pete into her office. She reviewed the footage with him. She asked him what he saw. Pete tried to defend his actions at first. He said he was just being thorough. Patricia asked if he had been equally thorough with the white visitors who came in that same day. Pete went quiet. He knew the answer. Patricia did not fire Pete. Instead, she put him back through training. She also assigned him a mentor, another guard named Carlos Lopez, who had excelled at implementing the new approach. Carlos worked with Pete. He showed him how to assess actual security concerns without relying on bias. Slowly, Pete began to understand. It took time, but eventually he improved. That was the thing about real change. It was not instant. It required patience and persistence. The improvements extended beyond security. The hiring process was bringing in more diverse candidates. The interview panels were more balanced. New employees came from schools the company had never recruited from before. They brought fresh perspectives and different experiences. The culture of the workplace became richer because of it. Marcus started attending more company events, not as the distant CEO, but as an engaged leader. He went to team happy hours and department celebrations. He listened to employee concerns during town hall meetings. He made himself available in ways he had not been in years. People noticed. They appreciated that he cared enough to be present. One afternoon, Marcus was walking through the engineering department. He overheard a conversation between two programmers. They were arguing about the best way to solve a technical problem. One was a young white man. The other was a black woman. Marcus paused to listen. The woman made a suggestion. The man immediately dismissed it without really considering it. The woman tried again. The man talked over her. Marcus intervened. He walked over and asked them to explain the problem. The man started talking quickly, trying to explain his solution. Marcus held up his hand. He turned to the woman and asked for her input. She explained her approach clearly. It was actually quite brilliant. Marcus pointed out the merits of her solution. He asked the man if he had really listened to what she said. The man looked embarrassed. He admitted he had not. This became a teaching moment. Marcus talked about how unconscious bias affected even technical discussions, how people sometimes dismissed good ideas based on who said them, rather than the quality of the idea itself. The two programmers listened. The man apologized to his colleague. She accepted. Marcus left them to work it out together. Later, he heard they had combined both approaches and created something even better. These small interventions added up. Marcus could not be everywhere at once, but he could model the behavior he wanted to see. Other leaders started doing the same. They called out bias when they saw it. They amplified voices that were being ignored. They created space for different perspectives. The culture was transforming one interaction at a time. Marcus also made sure to celebrate successes. When teams met diversity goals, he acknowledged it publicly. When employees spoke up about problems, he thanked them for their courage. When departments showed improvement in inclusion metrics, he highlighted their efforts. Positive reinforcement worked. People wanted to be recognized for doing good work. Making inclusion. Part of that recognition made it a priority. The board meetings were different now, too. Marcus insisted that diversity and inclusion metrics be part of every quarterly report, right alongside revenue and growth and market share. Some board members had resisted at first. They said it was not traditional business practice. Marcus said that was exactly why it needed to change. Business could not be separated from the people who made it happen. Taking care of people was taking care of business. 6 months had passed since that morning in the lobby. Horizon Technologies looked different now, not just in policies and procedures, but in the actual composition of its workforce. The company had hired over 200 new employees during that time. Almost 60% came from backgrounds traditionally underrepresented in tech. Women of color, people from low-income communities, older workers re-entering the field. Each brought unique perspectives and experiences. Marcus watched these changes with careful attention. He knew numbers alone did not tell the whole story. You could hire diverse people and still have an exclusive culture. The real question was whether these new employees felt welcome, whether they could thrive and grow and bring their whole selves to work. So he made it a point to check in with them regularly, not formal performance reviews but casual conversations about their experience. One of the new hires was a woman named Keisha Washington. She was 45 years old and had taken a decade off to raise her children. She had worried she was too old or too out of practice to get back into tech. But Horizon's new hiring approach looked at her skills and potential rather than the gap in her resume. She joined the data analytics team and quickly proved her worth. Marcus had coffee with her one morning and asked how things were going. Keisha was honest. She said mostly good, but some challenges. A few younger employees sometimes talked over her in meetings. Some assumed she did not understand new technologies, but she said her manager was supportive. When issues came up, they were addressed quickly. She felt like the company was trying even if it was not perfect. Marcus thanked her for the feedback. He made a note to work with managers on addressing age bias. That was another blind spot the company needed to tackle. The ripple effects of Horizon's transformation continued to spread. Other companies were watching and learning. Some reached out for guidance. Marcus was generous with advice, but he was also honest about how hard the work was. Change required commitment from the top. It required resources and time and willingness to be uncomfortable. Many companies wanted quick fixes. Marcus told them there were no shortcuts. Real cultural change took years. A group of CEOs from other tech companies invited Marcus to speak at a private gathering. These were leaders of major firms with thousands of employees. They met in a conference room at an expensive hotel. Marcus stood in front of them and told his story. He did not sugarcoat it. He talked about his own failures as a leader, how he had let his company drift from its values, how it took a painful wake-up call to get back on track. One CEO named Paul Henderson asked how Marcus balanced business priorities with social issues. He said shareholders cared about profits, not politics. Marcus leaned forward. He said this was not about politics. It was about basic human dignity. It was about building companies that worked for everyone, not just a privileged few. And he said the data was clear. Diverse companies performed better. They innovated more. They understood customers better. Good values were good business. Another CEO named Susan Price asked about pushback. She said her company had tried diversity initiatives before and faced resistance. Employees complained about reverse discrimination. White men felt targeted. Marcus nodded. He said resistance was normal when you challenged the status quo. People who benefited from the old system would push back. But he said you could not let that stop progress. You had to listen to concerns, address legitimate issues, but also stand firm on core values. The conversation went on for hours. Some CEOs were genuinely interested in learning. Others seemed skeptical. Marcus knew he could not convince everyone. But if even a few of these leaders went back and tried to do better, that would create positive change for thousands of workers. That was worth the effort. Back at Horizon Technologies, Marcus started a new initiative. He called it the Mentorship Bridge. The idea was to connect employees with mentors both inside and outside the company. Especially important was helping newer employees from underrepresented backgrounds connect with senior leaders. These relationships could open doors and provide guidance that formal structures often missed. Tanya Johnson was paired with Marcus himself as her mentor. They met once a month for lunch or coffee. Marcus shared lessons from his career. Tanya shared her experiences and aspirations. She wanted to lead her own team someday. Marcus helped her develop the skills she would need. He also made sure she got opportunities to shine. He invited her to present at a board meeting. He suggested her for a high-profile project. These small acts of sponsorship made a big difference. Christopher Lane had gone through his own transformation. He had worked hard to examine his biases and blind spots. He volunteered to lead a new employee resource group for allies, people who wanted to support diversity efforts even if they were not from marginalized groups themselves. The group met monthly to discuss how to be better colleagues and advocates. Christopher found it meaningful work. It helped him feel like he was contributing to positive change. Patricia had become a real champion for the transformation. She pushed other departments to take inclusion seriously. She held managers accountable for creating welcoming teams. She also traveled to other companies to share what Horizon had learned. She spoke at conferences about HR best practices for inclusion. She was proud of the work they were doing. It felt like the most important work of her career. Kelly had stayed at her security desk, but her whole approach had changed. She greeted everyone warmly now. She learned names and faces. She made visitors feel welcome while still maintaining security. She took pride in being the first person people met when they came to Horizon. She wanted that first impression to be a good one. Several visitors had written compliments about her. Patricia made sure Kelly knew her growth was noticed and valued. The changes were not just internal. Horizon Technologies started partnering with community organizations. They sponsored coding boot camps in underserved neighborhoods. They offered internships to students from local community colleges. They created scholarship programs for promising young people who could not afford traditional tech education. Marcus believed the company had a responsibility to help create opportunity, not just take advantage of it. One of the scholarship recipients was a teenager named Jordan Ellis. He grew up in a low-income neighborhood where tech careers seemed impossible, but he was brilliant with computers. The scholarship paid for a coding boot camp and then an internship at Horizon. Marcus made sure to meet Jordan personally. He saw his younger self in the kid's hungry eyes and determined attitude. He wanted to help Jordan avoid some of the obstacles he had faced. During their first meeting, Marcus told Jordan something important. He said Jordan belonged in tech. He said Jordan's background was not a disadvantage but a source of unique perspective. He said the industry needed people who understood different communities and experiences. Jordan soaked up every word. He worked harder than anyone in his boot camp. When the internship started, he proved himself quickly. By the end of summer, he had a job offer to join the company full-time after finishing his education. Stories like Jordan's reminded Marcus why this work mattered. It was not just about fixing problems at one company. It was about opening doors for the next generation. It was about creating paths for people who had talent and drive but lacked opportunity. Every time Marcus felt tired or frustrated with slow progress, he thought about young people like Jordan and Tanya. He thought about all the potential that got wasted when bias and discrimination blocked opportunity. The media continued to follow Horizon's journey. Some coverage was positive. Other articles were critical or skeptical. Marcus did not worry too much about the press. He focused on doing the right work regardless of how it was perceived. He knew real change happened quietly over time, not in dramatic headlines. The important thing was that employees felt the difference, that candidates from diverse backgrounds felt welcomed, that the company lived its values every day, not just in marketing materials. 1 year after the lobby incident, Horizon Technologies held its annual company meeting. Nearly 3,000 employees gathered in the large auditorium. The room buzzed with energy and conversation. Marcus stood backstage feeling nervous in a way he had not felt in years. This was an important moment. A chance to reflect on how far they had come and acknowledge how far they still needed to go. When he walked onto the stage, the room erupted in applause. It surprised him. He had expected polite recognition, but this felt genuine. People stood up. They clapped and cheered. Marcus felt emotion rise in his throat. He took a breath and gestured for everyone to sit. When the room quieted, he began to speak. He started by talking about that morning a year ago, when he walked into the lobby dressed casually and was told to leave. Some people in the audience knew the story well. Others had only heard rumors. Marcus laid out what happened clearly and honestly. He did not shame anyone. He simply stated facts. He had been judged based on his appearance. He had been assumed not to belong in his own building. It was painful and wrong, but then he said something important. That moment was also necessary. It showed him that good intentions were not enough. It showed him that the company had drifted from its values. It forced him and everyone else to do better. Sometimes the hardest moments created the most important opportunities for growth. He would not wish that experience on anyone, but he also would not trade the lessons it taught. The screen behind him lit up with photos from the past year. Training sessions with diverse groups of employees, community partnerships and scholarship programs, new hires from all different backgrounds. The images told a story of transformation and growth. Marcus walked the audience through the journey, the mistakes they made, the lessons they learned, the progress they achieved. He was honest about ongoing challenges too. This work was never finished. They would have to keep working at it. Then something unexpected happened. Patricia Simmons stood up from her seat in the front row. She asked if she could say something. Marcus handed her the microphone and stepped back. Patricia faced the audience. Her voice was clear and strong. She apologized publicly for her role in what happened that day. She said she had failed as a leader. She had failed the values the company was built on. But she thanked Marcus for giving her the chance to learn and grow. One by one, others stood up. Kelly from security, Christopher from marketing, Lisa from accounting. Each person who had been in the lobby that day came forward. They shared their perspectives. They talked about what they learned. They committed to continuing the work of building a better company. It was raw and honest and deeply moving. Marcus stood to the side with tears in his eyes. This was real courage, admitting mistakes publicly, committing to change in front of thousands of colleagues. When they finished, Marcus took the microphone back. He said these colleagues showed tremendous bravery. They acknowledged their failures knowing they would face judgment. That was the kind of courage the company needed. Not the courage to never make mistakes, but the courage to own them and grow from them. He also acknowledged his own failures, how he had stepped back from leading the culture, how he assumed good intentions would perpetuate themselves. He promised to never make that mistake again. Hands went up around the auditorium. Employees wanted to share their own stories. Marcus pointed to a young man in the middle section. The man stood and introduced himself as Carlos Martinez. He said he was hired 2 months ago through the new recruitment program. He explained that he had applied 3 years earlier and never heard back. This time his resume was reviewed without his name or photo. He got the interview based on his skills. It changed his life. He thanked Marcus with a shaking voice. More hands went up. More stories were shared. An older woman who got promoted after years of being overlooked. A team leader who learned to recognize his biases and build a diverse team. A person with a disability who finally found a workplace with real accommodations. Each story added to the collective understanding of why this work mattered. These were not abstract concepts. They were real people whose lives were affected. The meeting went longer than scheduled, but nobody seemed to mind. People lingered afterward talking to each other, forming new connections, making commitments to support one another. The energy in the room felt electric and purposeful. Marcus watched it all, feeling something he had not felt in a long time. Hope. Real hope that they were building something better. Later that evening, Marcus stood in the lobby where it had all started. The space looked the same physically, but everything felt different. Kelly was at the security desk greeting the evening cleaning crew warmly. She knew their names. She asked about their families. The walls displayed artwork from diverse artists representing different cultures and experiences. The mission statement had been revised to explicitly commit to equity and inclusion. A delivery person entered carrying packages. He was an older Latino man who looked tired from a long day. Kelly smiled at him genuinely. She asked how she could help. The man explained his deliveries. Kelly checked her system and provided visitor badges without any suspicion. She thanked him for his work and wished him a good evening. It was a small routine interaction. But to Marcus, it represented everything they had been working toward. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from his old mentor, Beverly Hughes. She had watched the company meeting through the live stream. She wrote that she was proud of him. This was the company she always knew he could build. Marcus smiled and typed back. He said it was still a work in progress. They were trying. Beverly replied that trying was all anyone could do. Keep trying. Keep growing. Keep doing better. Marcus put his phone away and took one last look around the lobby. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The work of building an equitable company was never finished. There would be setbacks and failures. People would make mistakes. But they had created something important. A foundation built on truth and accountability. A culture that valued dignity and respect for every person. That foundation would hold. As Marcus headed toward the elevator, he noticed a young person near the entrance. A black teenager wearing a hoodie and carrying a backpack. The kid looked nervous and uncertain. Marcus changed direction and approached with a warm smile. He asked if he could help with something. The teenager seemed surprised that someone important-looking was talking to him. He explained he was there for the mentorship program but was not sure where to go. Marcus felt his heart swell. This program was one of his favorite initiatives, connecting young people from underserved communities with opportunities in tech. He told the teenager he was in exactly the right place. The program met on the 7th floor. He offered to take him up personally. As they rode the elevator together, the teenager relaxed. He asked questions about technology and careers and what it took to succeed in this field. Marcus answered each question thoughtfully. He told the teenager his name was Jordan Ellis. He said Jordan belonged in tech. He said Jordan's background was not a weakness but a source of strength. Different perspectives made companies better. Innovation came from diversity. He told Jordan to work hard and stay curious and never let anyone tell him he did not belong somewhere. Jordan nodded with shining eyes. He said yes, sir, and thank you. When they reached the 7th floor, Marcus watched Jordan join the other mentorship participants. Young people from all backgrounds and communities, all hungry to learn, all full of potential. This was the real legacy, not the buildings or the profits or the market share. But the doors opened, the paths created, the possibilities expanded for everyone who came after. Marcus had built his company from nothing once before. He had proved everyone wrong who said he could not do it. Now he was building it again. Not from scratch, but from truth. Building it on a foundation of real values, not just words on a website. Building it to last beyond his own time there. Building it to create opportunity for people like Jordan and Tanya, and Keisha and Carlos and everyone else who just needed a fair chance. As he rode back down in the elevator, Marcus thought about the journey. The pain and growth and hard lessons learned. He thought about all the people who contributed to the transformation. The ones who admitted mistakes. The ones who did the hard work of changing. The ones who spoke up when they saw problems. Change was not the work of one person. It was collective effort. It was everyone choosing to do better. The elevator doors opened and Marcus stepped back into the lobby. Kelly waved at him from the security desk. He waved back. Tomorrow he would come to work and continue the journey. There would be more challenges. More opportunities to succeed or fail. More chances to live up to the values they had committed to. But tonight, in this moment, Marcus allowed himself to feel satisfied. Not because they had arrived at some perfect destination, but because they were finally truly on the right path. And that path would lead to something better for everyone who walked it. Word began to spread beyond Horizon Technologies. Other companies in the tech industry started hearing about what Marcus was doing. Some were inspired and reached out to learn more. Others were critical and defensive. A competing company's CEO, named Gregory Stone, wrote an article for a business magazine. He suggested that Marcus was overreacting. He said a simple security misunderstanding was being turned into a political statement. He implied that Marcus was being divisive and creating problems where none existed. The article got a lot of attention. People on social media argued about it. Some agreed with Gregory. Others defended Marcus. The controversy grew until a major news program invited Marcus to respond. He accepted the invitation. The interviewer was a sharp journalist named Nicole Warren. She had a reputation for asking tough questions and not accepting easy answers. Marcus knew this interview would be important. How he handled it would affect not just his company, but the larger conversation about discrimination in corporate America. The interview was live. Marcus sat across from Nicole in a television studio. Bright lights shined on them. Cameras pointed at their faces. Nicole did not waste time with small talk. She asked directly if Marcus was punishing his employees for a simple mistake. She asked if he was being too harsh. Marcus leaned forward. He spoke clearly and calmly. He said what happened at his company was not a simple mistake. It was a symptom of a deeper problem, a problem that existed throughout their industry and society. Nicole pressed him. She asked if all companies did not have security protocols. Marcus agreed they did, but he said the question was how those protocols were applied. Were they applied equally to everyone, or did they target certain groups more than others? He said the data was very clear. People of color were questioned and stopped and excluded at much higher rates, even in professional settings, even when they had every right to be there. Nicole said some people claimed he was making this about race when it was really just about security. Marcus smiled, but there was sadness in it. He said that was the most common way people avoided the issue. They wanted to believe race did not matter anymore. They wanted to think they lived in a world where skin color was irrelevant. But he asked Nicole to talk to any black professional. Ask if they had ever been mistaken for janitor or delivery person in their own office. Ask if they had been questioned about whether they belonged somewhere. The stories would be remarkably consistent. Marcus pulled out his phone. He showed Nicole, Photos of messages he had received over the past few weeks, hundreds of them from people sharing their experiences. A black doctor mistaken for a hospital janitor. A Latino executive asked to show identification in his own building. An Asian engineer assumed to be a foreign exchange student. These were not isolated incidents. They formed a pattern of assumptions based on appearance rather than reality. The interview lasted 30 minutes. By the time it ended, social media was already reacting. The video was shared thousands of times. People commented and debated and shared their own stories. Within days, other business leaders started speaking up. Some admitted they had experienced similar discrimination. Others acknowledged they had witnessed it and done nothing. A movement was building. Companies across the country began examining their own practices and policies. But not everyone was supportive. Marcus started receiving threats. Some were vague messages telling him to stop causing trouble. Others were specific and frightening. His security team became very concerned. They urged him to increase his personal protection. They wanted him to stop doing public appearances. They said he was making himself a target. Marcus refused. He said he did not build his company by playing it safe. He was not going to start hiding now. One evening, Marcus was working late in his office. Most employees had gone home. The building was quiet. There was a knock on his door. Danny Wu stood there looking troubled. Marcus invited him in and offered him a seat. Danny sat down, but he looked uncomfortable. He fidgeted with his hands. Finally, he said he had been offered another job. A competitor had reached out with an impressive offer. Higher salary, more stock options, a fancy title. It was a great opportunity by any measure. Marcus congratulated him. He said it sounded wonderful. Danny looked confused. He said he did not know if he should take it. He said what they were doing at Horizon felt important. It felt like they were actually making a difference. He did not know if he wanted to walk away from that. Marcus studied the young man. He said something he wished someone had told him years ago. Danny did not owe the company his loyalty, not even this company. He had to make the choice that was right for his own life and career. Danny asked about the mission. What about all the work they were doing to change things? Marcus said the mission was not confined to their building. If Danny went to another company, he could take these lessons with him. He could be the person who spoke up when something was wrong. He could help build better culture wherever he landed. The work did not stop just because he changed jobs. Danny thought about this. He asked what would happen if he stayed. Marcus said they would be glad to have him, but he should stay because he wanted to, not because he felt guilty or obligated. A week later, Danny made his decision. He chose to stay at Horizon Technologies, but it was his choice made freely after considering all his options. Marcus respected that. Several other employees faced similar decisions during this time. Some chose to leave for other opportunities. Marcus wished them well and meant it. Others decided to stay and be part of the transformation. Both choices were valid. Both deserved respect. The changes at Horizon Technologies continued to spread outward like ripples in water. Local news picked up the story, then national news. Marcus was invited to speak at conferences and universities. He talked about building inclusive companies. He shared lessons learned from his experience. He admitted mistakes and failures along the way. People appreciated his honesty. They responded to his willingness to be vulnerable and real. Other tech companies started reaching out. Some wanted advice on improving their own cultures. Others wanted to partner on initiatives. Marcus was generous with his time and knowledge. He believed rising tides lifted all boats. Making one company better helped create pressure for all companies to improve. Competition could be a force for positive change if channeled correctly. But there was also backlash. Some investors worried that all this focus on culture would hurt profits. They wanted Marcus to get back to business as usual. Some board members expressed concerns in private meetings. Marcus listened to their worries. Then he showed them data. Employee satisfaction had actually increased during the transformation. Productivity had not dropped. In fact, some metrics showed improvement. People worked better when they felt respected and valued. Good culture was good business. Marcus also faced criticism from some activists who said he was not going far enough. They wanted more dramatic changes. They wanted quotas and mandates. Marcus understood their frustration. Change felt too slow when you had been waiting your whole life for fairness. But he believed in building something sustainable, something that would last beyond any one person or moment. That required patience and persistence. Through it all, Marcus kept thinking about that day in the lobby. The day he was told to leave his own building. It had been painful and humiliating. But it had also been necessary. It had forced him to confront uncomfortable truths. It had pushed him to do better. Sometimes the hardest moments created the most important opportunities for growth. He would not wish that experience on anyone, but he also would not trade the lessons it taught him.